Our next speaker, oh wow, all the way from District 57, which is now the district I live in Northern California. In this era of the pandemic, polarization, and unprecedented,
Unprecedented.
I got it, unprecedented times, our speaker is going to share an idea on strategies that he uses to take care of your mental well-being. A Toastmaster since 2008, our speaker is a past district director of District 57 Toastmasters. And by the way, I met him on the plane to Kuala Lumpur. We've been friends ever since. President of the Speakers Forum Club, and he's a member of the District 57 Speakers Bureau. Professionally, he's an account executive with Ocean Breeze Healthcare. And really amazing, he hosts a podcast called Leadership Lessons from the Negro Leagues. He's the one person I know that knows more about baseball than me. And he teaches me a lot about baseball. He lives in Alameda County, Alameda, California, with his wife, Catherine. Please join me in welcoming Steve Taddei.
Has anything ever blindsided us and confounded us more than the pandemic? It was a crisis like no other. We've had crises before, whether it was 9/11, the civil unrest of the 1960s, or world wars. And the go-to strategy for everybody during these crises would be to gather with family, gather with friends, gather with our religious community. And during the pandemic, that was the most reckless thing we could do. And then there was also the confusion and different people with different opinions. And the different opinions were logical because nobody on this call, I don't think anybody anywhere had been trained or had life experiences with pandemic lockdown. We had people that were going to stay put until this and right out the pandemic. Then there were other people, friends of mine, that said, hey, I'm young, I'm healthy. If I get COVID, I get COVID. It's on me. I'll get over it. But then we found out that, people get COVID, there are no symptoms. They don't even know they have it. Then they gather, they spread it. Other people get it, and they're the ones that suffer, some of them fatally. It was a time where it's been a time that's just been confusing. And COVID also made every other challenge in our life more challenging. If we had a challenge at work, chances are the challenge at work got worse. In fact, sometimes when you didn't even have a challenge at work, COVID created a challenge. If you had a challenge in a relationship, chances are the challenge in the relationship got worse. If you had a challenging health condition, chances are the challenging health condition got worse. Our Oakland 88 Club experienced a tragedy. In May of last year, one of our young members, Sue, took her own life. We were deeply honored when our mom and dad, who live in Aberdeen, Maryland, visited our meeting via Zoom. They wanted to know what Sue was doing, who her friends were, and just hear about Sue's friends' experiences working with Sue. We were shaken to the core when Sue's mother said that Sue was the second of 4 siblings that committed suicide. I don't know how comfortable mom was going to that meeting, but she was making it her point, her mission in life, to tell everybody she could to take mental and emotional health seriously. And if a loved one is giving hints like they might be about to take their own life, take it seriously. Now, about that same time, Katie Meyer, a soccer player at Stanford on the women's soccer team, also committed suicide. And then one of our really respected members of District 57, Ashley Harkness, is a military veteran who spends as much time as he can volunteering to help veterans who are in crisis. So my message tonight is about taking mental, emotional issues as seriously as we take our physical health seriously. I'm also going to stay in my lane. I am not a trained healthcare professional. And if you or somebody you love is considering something drastic like suicide, please get help. There's help available that will help you understand that your life is valuable. My purpose tonight is to take the stigma away. So let me tell you about my situation with COVID during the pandemic. We did the lockdown in February, or in March. About 6 months after the lockdown came about, my son Phil developed a MRSA infection. He was in the hospital in ICU for 5 weeks with a ventilator. The part that was torture was the fact that because of COVID, we couldn't go visit him. We were relegated to one phone call a day from the healthcare professional telling us about the events of the day, his progress, and every once in a while it'd be a couple steps backward. Now the good news is it was a happy ending. Phil fully recovered. He's working full time, doing great. And 2 weeks ago, in fact, less than 2 weeks ago, 11 days ago, we celebrated the joy of his wedding to the love of his life, Desi. But more happened. We had Sue commit suicide. And it got to the point to where I was feeling a lot of anxiety. Now, I listened intensely to Judy's speech, the first speaker. And Judy, you and I have to have a conversation, because what I'm talking about tonight is my experiences and what I've found worked with me, but I'd love to hear more about the work you do. I'm the high blood pressure guy you were talking about, and I also probably have a genetic disposition toward anxiety. And I believe that my anxiety was triggered by the events since the beginning of the pandemic. So I decided to get help. It was hard because I've got a lot of life experiences. I worked successfully for 40 years. I don't need to get therapy. But then again, who's been trained for what's been going on in our lives for the last 3.5 years? So I found a therapist. Where did I find the therapist? Well, the good news is the health plans we have at work are starting to treat mental and emotional health the same way they treat physical health. And I just went to my network. And sure enough, I found a therapist. She's in North Carolina. I'm in Alameda, California. We met on Zoom once a week. And then after about a month, we started meeting every 2 weeks. And now we're meeting every 4 to 6 weeks. The advice she gave me was earth-shattering. Wait for it. Steve, just control what you can control. Control what you can control. That was the most liberating piece of information, the most liberating idea I ever got. And I decided that I was going to control what I can control by doing 3 things. Now, one of the ideas was something I've been doing all my life, and that's exercise. And that has worked well. And the reason the exercise worked well is because it's a healthy outlet for our emotions. It kicks in the natural mood enhancers, endorphins, and it builds self-confidence. We have a complicated relationship with exercise. Many of us exercise when we want to lose weight. Many of us exercise when we don't look good, when we look in the mirror. Well, I suggest you exercise because it makes you feel better. Whether you step on the scale and you drop pounds, whether the clothes fit better or not, you are going to get benefits from exercising. If you choose to do intense, do intense. I've done intense before. I've had fun with it. I've run a marathon. I've run 2 marathons. I'm finished with that. I don't have a desire to run anymore, but I love to walk. And sometimes I just walk for an hour, and that works great. I don't care how fast I walk. I just get it in. Sometimes I'm out for a half a day. I walk for about 20 minutes, go to a bench, do a little reading, walk for another 20 minutes, do a little bit more reading, and there we go. I'm back 2 or 3 hours later, but I'm feeling better. Activity number 2, journaling. I call journaling the brain dump. Journaling is something I do at the end of every day. It allows me to self-reflect, and it allows me to get a little bit of mental clarity. I also, when I write down the thoughts of the day, the events of the day, and then I write down 5 things I'm grateful for. And on the worst possible day I have, I can still find 5 things I'm grateful for. And 5 big, really crazy dreams. Now, Michael Azure, do you know what the biggest crazy dream I write down every day? I've done about 80 episodes of leadership lessons from the Negro Leagues, and I haven't interviewed Willie Mays yet. And Willie Mays has still got it. He's still got that high-pitched laugh. And one of these days, I'm going to introduce Willie. And then another big crazy dream I have is I want to make this presentation at a Toastmasters International Convention. So those are 2 things I'm working on. And I write that down, and we're going to make it happen. Activity number 3, positive affirmations. You know what? Every one of us is doing affirmations already. We're all Toastmasters here. We had a meeting at 7 o'clock tonight. You ever wake up on the morning of a 7 o'clock meeting and say, oh boy, this is not going to go well. I didn't have time to practice the speech, or I've been working on this speech like crazy and they're not going to like it. It's going to be horrible. Well, congratulations, you're doing affirmations. I encourage you to give a little pushback to that affirmation by doing some positive affirmations. Positive affirmations basically tell the inner critic that's on your shoulder, I'm not buying what you're selling. The positive affirmations don't eliminate the inner critic. The positive affirmations just are a mechanism to give the pushback to the inner critic and get me back on the right track. So I've been working on this presentation for about a year now. I've given it several times in several different formats. And I pretty much had it ready to go when Michael invited me tonight. Then I got the email. Friday, I got an email from my friend, Todd. Todd has sent an email to a lot of his friends, and he said, everybody, I want to let you know, for the last 3 months, I've been getting treated for myeloma. And not only do I have myeloma, I have an aneurysm in one of my arteries. I read that email, and it's not the type of email you write back and say something brilliant in the return email. So all I could do was say, hey, Todd, can I call you tomorrow? And I wasn't sure what kind of answer I would give because I didn't know what kind of condition he was in. But like within seconds, Todd wrote back to me and he said, yeah, call me tomorrow morning. So I call him tomorrow morning, on Saturday morning. He picks up the phone and he sounded like Todd. He was cheerful. He had a lot of energy in his voice. And if I hadn't got the email the night before, if I just called him up randomly, I wouldn't have known he had a health issue. Well, he gave me a lesson on exercise, journaling, and positive affirmation. He said, Steve, I don't have as much energy as I like to have. So some days when I walk, I can get to the street corner. Other days, I can just get downstairs into the front yard. And sometimes I can only walk around the living room. But I'm going to get through this. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to do videos. Todd's not the type of guy that likes to write things on paper as much as he'll do a video and it'll be a great video. And he wants to put information out there about his journey with this and how he's doing. And he's got the idea of helping other people that are going through cancer. And I'm going to give you the greatest positive affirmation I've ever heard in my life. Todd said to me, I'm glad they found the myeloma. What are you talking about? Well, if they hadn't found the myeloma, they wouldn't have found the aneurysm, and we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So Todd's my inspiration. So I've mentioned my 3 activities that start with controlling what I can control. And that in a nutshell is all that we can do. Todd's controlling what he can control. And however this works out, Todd's going to be doing what Todd can do. Controlling what we can control puts a positive impact on our life. It puts a positive impact on the challenge we have. And controlling what we can control will improve our overall well-being. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you, Steve. Wow. Guys, my brain is blown out tonight. We've learned so much good stuff. It's crazy. Now, Steve, we're running out of time for Willie Mays. However, tell people, I sent you an article about something going on in Alabama with the Negro Leagues. Can you just mention that for a minute and what you did with that information I sent you?
You're only going to give me a minute? This is great. This is great. Well, one thing that I learned when I started this podcast is I can't hold people for an hour by myself. So I need to get a guest. And I found out that people are available, people you wouldn't think you would ever get. So I said Willie Mays, and he's my ultimate goal. But I've gotten to talk with a lot of people just by reaching out and asking them. And Willie Mays, before he went to the Giants, when he was 17 years old, played Negro League baseball. It was when baseball excluded, Major League Baseball excluded African Americans. He played for the Birmingham Black Barons at a ballpark called Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama. Well, it just so happens Rickwood Field is the oldest ballpark in the country. It's older than Fenway Park in Boston. It's older than Wrigley Field in Chicago. And this is huge. The Giants are going to play the St. Louis Cardinals on June 20th, 2024. That's how they're going to celebrate Juneteenth. So I said, I got to find somebody on this. So I just wrote a random person with the San Francisco Giants, a woman named Sue Peterson. And about 3 days later, I got a phone call from a 415 area code number that I'd never seen before. And I thought, usually I don't pick these up, but I'm going to pick this one up because I remember the email I sent. And it was a woman named Shauna who was assigned by Sue to call me up. And Shauna called me up And she set up an interview with Mario Alioto, who's the executive vice president of the Giants. So I talked to Mario last Tuesday, the 27th, and I released it Monday on July 3rd. And then Mario gave me the phone number of the person with the St. Louis Cardinals that has the same job as he has. The guy's name's Dan Farrell. Well, Dan said, hey, I'll talk to you, but the guy you really want to talk to is a guy named Mike Claiborne, who's one of the broadcasters for the Cardinals. So Mike and I have exchanged emails, and we haven't figured out when we're going to talk yet. But I learned 2 lessons in all these podcasts. Number 1, people will talk to you. And number 2, everybody knows somebody that knows somebody. So even though you might know the right person, there's somebody else out there that does, and you can get a lot of good connections. And if you don't do it that way, every book author has a LinkedIn page. And there's a good chance you can reach out to them with that. And they will say yes, because they want to talk to people to promote their book. So anyway, but this podcast has been fun and opened up a lot of doors.
So Steve, that means Steve is practicing what he's talking about, that he's connecting on this. He writes and talks about the Negro League all the time. And now he's talking to people that are putting on this Juneteenth event in the oldest baseball park in the country. And think about Willie Mace had to play there when he was 17 years old until he could get drafted by the Giants. This is, again, blowing my mind. And Steve, I hope you get to go. But this is so cool that I sent him an article and you ran with it way better than I ever hoped. And I'm excited to hear about this story.
Well, I'm excited to talk about it because it's fun.
This is great. Any other comments for Steve? Oh, Judy, and then Greg.
So yes, Steve, I'd love to connect with you, because just your journey alone is an inspiration for so many people. And I have clients that have that go down that path as well. And it's a struggle, but it's nice to know that there's people out there that are surviving and thriving.
I'm going to reach out to you because, like I said, I mentioned 3 activities I do, but another activity is I'm a learner, and I'd like to learn what you do and
vice
find
versa.
out how it would work, and what I do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thanks
Judy.
a lot.
Greg?
Hey, when are you going to come up and have lunch again?
Anytime. That sounds good.
I got some new golf clubs you want to try out.
All right.
Yeah.
I got
Poor Steve.
something here.
Well,
Oh, you know what I've got?
is he coming back?
I'm right here.
All right.
The last time I went to Greg's house, he gave me some stuff.
Oh, his old picture, his card.
He gave me this. He had a baseball card for when he ran for ID. So it's just like
All right, Greg. All right, Steve.
Greg's got an amazing man cave.
We know that.